Welcome back to BookTok's podcast. I'm Marissa. I read Alchemized, and this is kind of a controversial book, so I want to approach this review very carefully, but I do want to address this book because it has lingered long after I finished, and I don't know if it's because I loved it, hated it, it may be neither. So we're going to get into it now. Okay, so Alchemized sparked a lot of controversy, and there were a couple different reasons for that. I actually have my notes here, and I'm going to walk through some of the reasons just up front because I kind of feel this video needs to address the controversy before we get into the actual book. Also, if I didn't say this already, this will be mostly spoiler free. And if there are any spoilers, I will make sure to put that on the screen. But Alchemized by SenLinYu is a controversial book, and it stems from a couple different things. Let me pull up my list. To start off, fan fiction. If you don't know, this is based on fan fiction. We'll get into that. It's now commercially published. There are some dark romance expectations versus how it was executed. There is a lot of trauma and extreme just trauma narratives and abuse and torture and that kind of stuff. So again, we're going to touch on that a little bit, and then just the ongoing debates about the main character and whether she ever kind of got her agency back and became herself, found her identity again, apart from the love interests and the abuse and the trauma. So all that to say, this is a very heavy book and a heavy topic. It's over 1,000 pages. This book is probably like 3 or 4 pounds. It's very heavy. And while there is a bit of a trigger warning at the start of the book, the author actually gives the main trigger warning at the end, which is a little weird. At the beginning of the book, she basically says, reference the end of the book for the triggers. So we are going to get into that. We're going to start though with the fan fiction aspect because, again, it's a little bit controversial. This book, Alchemized, if you don't know, is based on a fan fiction that SenLinYu wrote called Manacled, which was a Hermione, Harry Potter inspired fan fiction. That is kind of its whole own separate discussion about how you feel about J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter at this point. I am someone who personally grew up on those books and loved Harry Potter, so I have no problem with the Hermione fan fiction. I think where it gets a little messy is kind of the expectations around how we judge fan fiction versus a published book. And so the fact that it got picked up and is now being published, the question is, do we grade it on the same scale? Can you even grade it on the same scale? Because a fan fiction is built on an existing work that has, in the case of Harry Potter, 7 books to back up the content. If you pull this out of that world, this book has to now stand on its own. And I think there is some debate on whether SenLinYu was able to achieve this book standing on its own. I have read many 1-star reviews on Goodreads that did not know it was based on fan fiction. And when they found out, they basically said, yeah, this doesn't stand on its own. There's too much context missing. If I had known this was based on Hermione, it would have made a lot more sense. So there's that part. There's also just the part of, is it plagiarizing to base something off another author's work, run with it, and then get published? I mean, I've definitely seen that debate as well. Again, I'm not gonna touch that so much because I don't have a problem with fan fiction, despite what TikTok thinks. I did get canceled on TikTok for saying something one time about basically holding editing standards of published books up to a published book standard. I didn't have problems too much with the editing of this book. I think it went through editors. The thing is, it is 1,000 pages, so there are mistakes in here and there are pacing issues and things like that. But overall, as far as it being fan fiction, didn't have a problem with it. I think the book may stand on its own, but I have the years of Harry Potter experience and I went into this knowing it was based on that. So I'm not a good judge of character on that one. So I'm not going to get into necessarily that debate. I am just saying that's part of the controversy. The next set of controversy, is about the sexual violence, torture, and trauma in this book. Again, there are those trigger warnings at the start of the book. That is controversial. I have seen that talked about extensively and in reviews extensively. And I think one of the big problems is whether some of the sexual violence was properly characterized as what it was, or whether it was romanticized. And I don't think this is a spoiler to say, but I'll just give like small spoiler warning. Again, I don't think it spoils anything. The question really comes into play because the male love interest is the one um, performing sexual violence against the female main interest, the female love interest, the female main character. So it really branches into this realm of, you know, since they are love interests, does it become romanticized? Did SenLinYu do a good enough job of characterizing it for what it was? I will maybe get into that, but again, that feels like a topic I don't want to touch too much. I guess what I will say about it is I think by the end, this controversy runs into the real kind of big controversy I saw, which was the main character's agency, just because she becomes so intertwined with the male love interest that I'm not sure she ever returns to a place of self identity. And I think that is recognized in some ways. I think by the end of the story, the author uses a side character to bring it up to the main character and say, look, you're the only one who likes this guy. You know, like he's a bad guy. He's done bad things, and you're the only one who gets on with him. And the main character basically says, yeah, like I know, but I can't be myself apart from him. So I think the author addresses it in the sense that she confirms there is no agency for our main character. Again, I'm not going to give spoilers about how it ends or anything like that. Just know that's part of the controversy of whether the sexual violence was too much romanticized. Other bit of controversy, I don't really see this as that big of a controversy, but was just the how it was framed, how it was marketed as being a dark romance, and then really, really, this is 1,000 pages of just hopelessness. I was explaining it to Kayla as imagine if in Throne of Glass, Manon lived, everyone else died. Like Manon's not the main character. Aylin's the main character. Imagine Aylin died, Rowan died, the 13 die. The only survivor is Manon. She's completely alone. She has absolutely no one and no one. She's in darkness. She's alone. She's being tortured. And that's that is this book. That's basically what happens. The main character is a survivor, a war survivor, and she kind of wakes up with limited memory. She remembers most things, but there are some, limitations in her memory. And everyone she knew and loved is dead. She is a prisoner of war. She is being kind of tortured for her memories, and that is the book. So as far as dark romance, that category goes, I'm not super familiar with the fan fiction dark romance world, but I would say if you're getting into it for dark romance, the romance is less than what the bleaklessness or the bleak and hopelessness of this book is. So keep that in mind. We're like 8 minutes into this video and I haven't even gotten to the book, but I'm just trying to frame this in the best context I can because if you go into this expecting like a romantasy, like a Crescent City or a Red Queen or, whatever, like a big fantasy popular book, I think you're going to be surprised. I was surprised. It it sits weird with you. It sits weird with me at least in that it's very heavy, it's very dark. However, I think there is a current that runs through of hope. And so I think that's kind of what I want to focus on as my takeaway from this book is just there is hope interwoven into the story because she really is alone. And what she makes of her life is that sense of hope. I'm never going to, let go. I have to stay alive. I have to keep going for whatever her motivation is. That's kind of what I take away. All that is preface, all that is controversy. I mean, that's the first thing I just wanted to address before we get into my actual thoughts and feelings and review is just this is a heavy book. If you're going into it for light, happy feelings, this is not something you should be reading. This is heavy. This is dark. There's trauma. There is abuse. There is loneliness. And there is a sense of loss of self. So all that to say, Reader beware. I think I've kind of already given a quick summary of Alchemized, but it is a dark fantasy. Again, I'm reading from my notes. That's why I'm looking down. It's a dark fantasy. It leans heavily into psychological and emotional intensity. There's, this erosion of identity, erosion of agency. There's this sense of just hopelessness. But it's about a girl named Helena. She is the only war survivor she's from the good guy's side, I guess, the eternal flame. And it's kind of what happens to her. And it's about her getting her memories back because her memories have been suppressed by magic. They're not sure who has suppressed her memories, but the bad guys want to see if there was something in there that they need to know to help them achieve their end goal, which is immortality. So Helena's memories have kind of been wiped in that regard, but she remembers enough to know everyone she loved is dead. She watched everyone she loved die, and she is now a prisoner of a guy named Kane Farron. That's what it's about. We've already talked about why the book's so polarizing. Again, stems from fan fiction, a lot of trauma and abuse. And I'm not going to say the actual word, but it rhymes with the fruit grape. And the male main character does it to the female main character. It's traumatic to read about. It's traumatic for the main character. And so the question becomes, is it romanticized that this is the romantic interest? Again, polarizing, a lot of controversy there because some fans of the book who are diehard fans want to say, well, it wasn't really great. It was, because of XYZ. There's a reason for it. No, sorry. They say there's a reason for it. There's never a reason for it. They say there's a reason for it. And in the sense that there is context given, sure. But the 1-star reviews I've seen who have said, look, guys, this was great. We can't romanticize this. I completely get their point of view. I also understand there's context given. There are people who say, oh, if you just keep reading, it all comes together and makes sense. I agree. It does all come together and make sense in how the story progressed. But that is one very polarizing point of this book, and that has really divided readers. And I think people who are fans of these kinds of books need to be careful defending some of the themes. Like, I'm not criticizing anyone. I would say we need to be careful about what we defend and how we word it, because we need to call things for what they are. And, if you want to say, well, once context is given, it's still not right, but, it ends up making sense in the context of the book, and the main character is able to rationalize it and understand why it happened. You can make that argument, but I would just say, fans of the book, be careful, because there are people who are not going to be able to read this, or who will read this and not finish it and be absolutely shocked by people defending it. That's my little soapbox. I'm gonna jump off that now. We're going to move on. Okay. For me, my personal reading experience with Alchemized. This book is divided into 3 parts. I almost DNF'd it. I was about 200 pages in. I was texting Kayla and I was like, I just don't know that I can push through. It is so boring. Like, part 1 was just confusing and boring. And, it's confusing because she doesn't have her full memories. There are lapses in her memories. And the author weaves in memories, but I'm not sure the break in the text is very clear that that's what's happening. So, like, you're reading about Helena doing something, and then all of a sudden she's experiencing a flashback, but you don't necessarily know it's a flashback completely. I mean, you kind of put 2 and 2 together, but it's not super clear. And I will say it was just a little confusing, and it was boring. Like, I'm sorry. Part 1 was boring. Here's the thing though. I loved part 2. Part 2 was where things I thought got really interesting, because in part 1, that's where you experience a lot of the loneliness and devastation, and her just remembering it's bleak and hopeless. They lost the war. Everyone she loved is dead. She watched them die brutal deaths. The people she swore to defend, they're gone forever. They've lost the war. She's a prisoner. Her only way out is to, off herself. So it's very bleak. It's very hard to read. It's heavy. But by part 2, you really pick up with learning what happened. It ends up going back in time and explaining the war, during the war, and right at the end, kind of the fallout. And that was where things got really interesting. You get context for who Helena is, why she's important or why she's not important. You get context for her relationship with the main male interest, Kane Farron. I keep wanting to say Pharaoh, my bad. Kane Farron. And you build that relationship, and that relationship is built pre-sexual violence. So again, part 2 is really interesting because there's a relationship there that existed, and then after the war, the relationship has changed. So, not trying to give spoilers, that might have teetered on a spoiler just a little bit, but that's kind of the gist of it. Part 2, you get the background finally. Part 3, you return to the present. And again, I was bored. I don't know what it was. I think part 2 or part 3 went on for too long. It could have been wrapped up much quicker because once you get the context for why everything happened in the war and how it ended, now you're back to, okay, what does Helena do? And instead of getting to the crux of that, what does she do? What does Farron do? How do they get out of this? How do they escape? Or how do they beat the bad guy? You just get more of the same. It's back to, well, she's still a prisoner. Oh, well, now that we know we're prisoners, oh, well, we'll take walks in the garden where they can't hear us and we'll talk about things, but like, we're not doing anything. And I was bored. I was bored. So my reading experience was very like down, up, and then down. But the ending, that last line, for those who have read Manacled, know what the last line is. I will say it did spark a lot of emotions, and I felt weird about the entire reading experience. So that was my experience. It was up and down, and I liked it. I didn't like it. I was a little scarred by some parts. I was confused by some parts. And at the end of the day, I get it. I get the hype for the book. I don't recommend it to 80% of the population. But for that small percentage that really likes dark romance, dark themes, and is okay with reading about sexual violence, you'll be okay with this book. My friend Kayla was asking me if she should jump on the bandwagon and read it because, it's so popular right now. It's so popular, and you don't want to get left behind in the book world. If there's something really cool happening, you want to jump on the bandwagon and read it. And I just told her, look, Kayla, you're a romance reader. You like the happily ever afters. You like light and not fluffy, but just things that make you feel good. This is not a book that makes you feel good at any point, pretty much. Because whether it's pre-war, during war, or post-war, the scars of all of that exist. There's just this undercurrent. I said there was an undercurrent of hope. There's also an undercurrent, though, of just changing who you are, devastation. Things change you. And the war changed Helena. The war changed Farron. Obviously, her being in prison changed her. She's losing who she is. And does she ever get back to who she was? Does anyone? Life happens. And I feel like that was something, in my 20s, I really had to reconcile with was you never actually get back to who you were because you're a constant evolving person and the things you experience change you. And I think SenLinYu does a really good job of doing that with Helena, just showing that who she was in the war is not who she gets to be at the end. And is that okay? That's life. So there you go. That was kind of like my takeaway is just this. It's kind of a play on life. It's a play on hope. It's a play on the devastations of war. From a written perspective, I think Alchemized is written really well. I would absolutely read something else by SenLinYu as long as it was like part 2 and not parts 1 and 3 where I was a little more bored. But part 2, really interesting, really good. The prose is very introspective. I do think there's a bit of info dumping. I think that's kind of necessary, though, when you have a book with memory loss, you are going to get some info dumped, and that's just kind of how it plays out a lot of the times. I think SenLinYu is a very good writer, and I think she really focuses on the characters and the character development, and so from that perspective, I also enjoyed it. Here's what I will say. I think I will or would enjoy it more on a reread now that I know everything. I actually have already reread part 1 because as soon as I finished the book, I said to myself, part one would make so much more sense now. Like, I kind of want to see what I missed. And I just jumped right back in. I just started right back over, and I've already read part one again, which is like 300 pages. And I did it in like 2 days because I needed to see if it made sense. And it does. It makes so much more sense. There are characters that are introduced in part one that don't make sense at the time because you don't have the part two background to figure them out. But I think it is a much better reread than it is an initial read. Does that affect the rating? Maybe, because should I be able to read it once through and understand things? Maybe. Again, it's a little hard because of the memory loss situation. And so I hate to ding a book for sticking to its plot. The whole beginning is she doesn't have these memories and the bad guys need these memories. So it's like SenLinYu couldn't necessarily explain everything right at the start. All that to say, it's interesting. It's not for everyone. I am rereading it. I'm probably going to finish rereading it. And I think on my reread, my rating of it will increase. I think when I initially finished, I was like, oh, I don't really know what to do with this. I think now that I've had time to process it and kind of relook at it, I'm enjoying it more. So I do think I'll reread anything, or not reread. I think I'll read other things by SenLinYu. If she's published, I'm not sure I'm going to dig through the deep dark web because I'm worried about what she might be posting on her fan fiction if this got published. But for people who like dark romance, I do think I can recommend it. For the rest of the population, I would say go into it with your expectations set about what it is, and do read those trigger warnings, because you may be like me and be 200 pages in and grab your hair and be like, what did I just read? Because there is a trope in this. I don't want to get, it would be a big spoiler to give away this trope, so I can't say what it is. But there is a trope in this that I do not like reading about, and the author throws it in and on page 200 of 1,000. And I was like, where's the story going now? Because that really throws a wrench in things. But she weaves it all together. It makes sense. So go into it with your expectations set. Okay, final thoughts. I kind of think I read someone's Goodreads and said, Alchemized is a book I can respect, but I don't know if I love. And I kind of think that summarizes how I feel about it. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I did enjoy it. I ate it up. I read it. Once I got to part two, I couldn't put it down. Do I respect it? Yes, I respect it because, I really think it's incredible that SenLinYu was a fan fiction writer and her thing was so popular that publishers were like, we have to pick this up. I think it might be getting a movie or a TV series. All that is very respectable. I think her writing is good. I think the story is very, what's a good word? I mean, it's going to stick with you. It in some ways matters. In some ways, some of the themes and abuse could have been left out. But overall, I think the story matters. And so for that, I can respect it. Did I love it? I don't know that you can love a book with so much violence and bleakness. So I don't know that I can say I loved it, but I do think if you can handle 1,000 pages of darkness, it's worth a read. I do think it matters because I think it mimics life, and I think it's a good lesson to take away that throughout everything Helena went through, there was this underlying, whether you call it a current or this kernel of hope that just kept her going. And I think that's something worth reading about. So while it's not a book I would universally recommend, I would love, other people's thoughts on it. I've read a ton of Goodreads reviews to see if I just missed something because it's so polarizing. I saw 1-star reviews or 5-star reviews, and I think I just fall somewhere right in the middle. I can respect this work. I can even enjoy this work, but I'm not going to be its biggest cheerleader. I'm just going to maybe sit back and see what other people have to say because it is so controversial. But I hope there are other people out there like me who can at least appreciate it without going too far into the hype train on it, because it is not a book that everyone should be reading. And I think as readers, we need to respect people's boundaries. And I think there are definitely boundaries crossed in this book that I would not be comfortable crossing as a writer. And I was okay crossing them as a reader. in the sense that I wanted to finish the book, but I would not want to cross them again. I respect it. I enjoyed it. And part two, if you can make it to part two, is well worth the read. So those are my thoughts. Hopefully nothing too controversial. I get canceled on TikTok all the time for giving my opinions, and I really hope none of these opinions are worth canceling me over. But, that is just Alchemized in a nutshell. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I'm happy to post more reviews, but we are going to get another video out for our podcast next week. We are covering The Woman in Suite 11 by Ruth Ware, and I just finished it, and I think we're going to have some thoughts on it. So definitely tune in next week if you want to see that. Otherwise, I will see you guys back here another day. Bye-bye.